Good evening and welcome to Dog Talk. I'm Dan Camilleri.
And I'm Laura McKillop. We'd like to start by thanking Enduro for their ongoing support in bringing you our live weekly Q&A. Tonight we're fortunate enough to be speaking with Jon Cantrall from Wongaburra Working Dogs and the current president of New South Wales 3 Sheep.
It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it?
It was, and I got the 3 Sheep wrong.
Yeah, you did.
New South Wales Sheepdog Workers.
Jon will be picking who he thinks has asked the best question of the night, and they will win a bag of Enduro high-end food for working dogs with real kangaroo meat.
Hey, Jon, how you going?
Good. How are you guys?
Yeah, not too bad.
Good, thanks, mate. How was your day, mate? What did you get up to?
Yeah, it was a pretty easy day. I wasn't at work today, so just pottering around at home. Had a couple of the dogs out, just moving the sheep into a new paddock I've finally fenced, and I'm sure they were discussing Jon's going on the podcast tonight, so let's just make it a bit spicy for him. So.
Mate, for those people that don't know Jon Cantrall, you want to tell us a bit about yourself, mate? Where you're from, where you grew up?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Sydney, around Hornsby, just north of Hornsby, a little place called Cowan. And so right from an early age, I always had a dog. So my first dog, she was older than me. It was a little silky terrier called Dolly. And so I always had that dog around growing up. And then fast forwarding a few years, ended up with a dog called Bonnie, and is still in Sydney, and got into agility and obedience and really enjoyed that. And then moving forward again a little bit more, ended up getting my first sheepdog named Rex, and got into the working dog side of things from there. Been a full-time firefighter for almost the last 27 years now. So the sheepdog side of things is certainly a hobby for me. We've got a 100-acre block just on the edge of Dubbo, just probably 10 minutes out of town, I suppose. So we've got a few sheep to support our addiction being sheepdogs. So, and I guess I'm in a couple of ways fortunate enough as well. Jackie's my wife, she's also into the sheepdogs. So I've got my team of dogs. Jackie's got her team of dogs. And so there's many afternoons on the veranda spent talking about dogs and all the things related around that. So, yeah.
I'm sure it brings lots of arguments too.
No, surprisingly not. It's probably those broader discussions, I guess, regarding training. Like, we certainly talk about our own dogs. I think probably we're very polite to each other. Like, where the veranda is, the training paddock's just out that way. Where the veranda is, one of us will be working a dog, the other one will be sitting on the veranda watching. And
trash talking the other one.
Pretty much. And then when one of us walks off, it's all very, oh, that's a great run, mate. You did really well.
And so have you always been a firefighter, or?
Yeah, well, next month, no, we're still in May, aren't we? No, in July, it'll be 27 years. So, yeah, it's been a fair portion of my working career.
Yeah, and how did you get into that?
Well, I left school. So I originally applied for ADFA, Australian Defence Force Academy. I think you do that in year 10 or something, and it's a very young age. And I thought, I'll join the army, and that was what I just presumed. And then anyway, went through uni, went through a few. Went through. I didn't go through uni, but thinking that I would finish school and end up going to uni. And so the HSC didn't agree with that. So as it turned out, I got onto an enrolled nursing course, and I was a nurse for probably about 3 years. And just during that time, I remember I was working at Ryde Hospital, and I thought, I might apply for the fire brigade. And I just happened to be at the nurses' station, and I thought, I'll just flick through the phone book and see how many fire stations there are and see what my chances are of getting in the fire brigade. And
you know what a phone book is?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah. I even know how to use one.
In the old days, Laura, this big, thick book and had lots of phone numbers in it. But,
There's one in Mum's office, so
You probably use it as a stool.
and I just presumed that I had a chance to get in the fire brigade, and didn't realise at the time how competitive it was to get into that sort of job. And so anyway, put an application in, and back then it was so I think the application process was about 2 years, like it took me. So I rang the fire brigade and said, "Oh, how do you apply?" And they said, "I'll wait for us to put an ad in the Sydney Morning Herald on Saturday morning." And waited for that, found the ad, cut it out, replied to that, and then the process started from there. So it was probably a 12-month recruitment sort of process, and going through different phases. So during that time, I was working at Hornsby Hospital in radiology, and then the end of that, before I got into the fire brigade, I was working in theatres. And so I'd book my RDOs when I had a day with the fire brigade during that application process. And then the final stage from memory was the physical aptitude test at the college at Alexandria at the time. And you knew doing those phases during the day that you passed or failed those various assessments. And so I passed those, and then it was about another 12 months before I actually started at the college. And then, so compared to some of the other guys in my class, I got in sort of first go. So I was 21 at the time. A lot of the other, or some of the other guys in that group, it might have been their second or third application. On average, they were probably closer to around 30 or so. But yeah, it was a bit of a process. And anyway, here I find myself nearly 27 years later, still firefighting. So it's not a bad gig.
So how long have you been in Dubbo then, John?
Well, I've been working in Dubbo. I think I transferred to Dubbo Fire Station towards the end of 2001. So I've been in Dubbo for 20 odd years working. And I think I was living in Mudgee when I transferred to Dubbo. So for a short period of time, I was commuting. I was working at Eastwood Fire Station at the time. So for a short period of time, I was commuting down to Eastwood from Mudgee. And then...
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking Eastwood in Sydney.
How do you get there?
Yeah.
Just next to North Ryde sort of thing. And then there's actually the guys at the station where I was working at Eastwood at the time said, "Oh, Dubbo's going full time. Why don't you put an application in for that?" So they were going for 24-hour staffing at the station. And just put my name on the transfer list and got a call. So I was kind of lucky that I didn't have to commute for very long, and then I got transferred to Dubbo, and so I was only an hour and a half from work instead of 3 hours from work. And I had a couple of dogs at that stage. I'm just trying to remember, 2 or 3 dogs at that stage, and so I used to take them to work. On that old roster, we used to work 2 day shifts and 2 night shifts. So I'd drive across to go to work, stay the night in Dubbo somewhere, and then work the next day shift, go home in between the day and the night, and then doing the 2 night shifts, just hang around town. Might have lunch with one of the guys that I work with or something like that. But I had the dogs with me as well, so I'd take them down to the river or something, or just depending what was going on. Like at some point, I used to work with dogs at Dubbo sale yards as well. I met a guy at a yard trial, and he said, "Oh," and this is back in the day, you didn't need a white card to work at the sale yards or whatever. And so he said, "Oh, what? I used to work the dogs at the sale yards and just speak to the agent. So do you need a hand for the day?" So I did that. And so the sheepdog I had at the time got quite a grounding in being a working dog. And so the agents were happy for that bit of help at the time. So this dog was unloading trucks and moving sheep around the laneways and helping with drafting a little bit and that sort of stuff. But I don't think you can do that these days unless you're on the books with the agents and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It was a pretty good time. So yeah, so I've probably been living in Dubbo. I think I moved here in 2005.
Yep.
Yeah. So
answer my question because I was going to ask how you went about getting transferred, but that's pretty handy, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. So it was a short commute across from Mudgee. Didn't matter what day of the week it was. You didn't have to deal with peak hour traffic or that sort of stuff. It was just always the same drive. You always knew if you just had to leave at this time. It was about 130 k's from where I lived at Mudgee at the time, so I'd just always make sure that I left early. So if I got a flat tire or something, I had enough time to.
And 5 minutes can cost you 15, 20.
Oh, exactly right. Yeah. So that's how I came to Dubbo.
Yeah, and where did Jackie come into all of that?
So I had a bit to do with horses previously, and so did Jackie. And we used to have on occasion dressage clinics at home. So sort of set up for the horses, probably more so than the dogs at that point in time. And we just met through that, and at some point, we started seeing each other, and here we are now that we're married and we're dog tragic. So,
and did I get it correct? Like you had your first working dog while you were still in Sydney, or had you already moved to Mudgee?
Yeah, so I prior to getting that first dog, you're sort of right. I picked the pup as a 4-week-old pup just prior to moving out of Sydney. So I used with the agility and obedience. I used to go out to Erskine Park a fair bit to the Dogs New South Wales, I think it's called now.
Yep.
Anyway, I was out there one day, and there was a resident manager, Darcy Martin, and Darcy was a prominent figure in the sheepdog circles. And anyway, I was out there one day, just occasionally I'll drive out and take the dogs out there just for something to do. And I knew there was a working dog club out there. And I was just walking the dogs around. This old bloke was driving around his old single cab Hilux ute with the window just half wound down, and came over and started chit-chatting. And, one thing led to another. We started talking about sheepdogs, and he said, I've got a litter of pups over at the house at the moment. And Darcy was pretty smooth as a salesman as well. And a lot of people that know him would probably agree. But anyway, he had these pups, and I said I was looking for one, and he said, "Oh, why don't you come over? I've got a worming," because they were due for their sort of 4-week worming kind of thing. And anyway, he said, "If you like, you can pick a pup out of this litter." And so I did, and he happened to have a little dot on his head between his two black ears, and so I sort of picked that as a thing to remember him. And he said, next time you come out, just come over, because the pups will be sort of big enough that you can take him out for a little walk. So it was probably a couple of months before I moved, and I said to Darcy, I can't take the pup straight away. And he said, that's all right. Whenever you come out, you just come over and get him. And I called the dog Rex. And he said, I'll just come over and get Rex and, just take him out for the day while you're here and that sort of stuff. And so I had him, he was probably close to 4 months old, I suppose, by the time I moved to Mudgee. The bitch I had at the time, that was my agility dog, Bonnie, one of her family things that she did, she had a personal space that was about this big. So Rex was welcome to the family and managed to get a scar on his nose pretty early on. So she let him know what her personal space was like. But that's where my first sheepdog came from, was from Darcy. And he turned out to be a terrific dog for me moving forward into the working dog scene.
And then you mentioned that early on you got into a bit of yard trialing.
Yeah, so I started off probably in mind with 3 sheep trialing. And so when I moved to Mudgee, very quickly I met Anne Leonard and Leo Sell, and Leo's passed away a few years ago, but Anne and Leo were probably very instrumental, I suppose, giving me that education with the sheepdogs and learning to train a dog. And so most often I'd either be at Anne's place or Leo's place, and the three of us would be there training dogs. We'd just decide whose place we were going to go to train the dogs. And Anne and Leo were keen on yard trials or 3 sheep trials. It didn't really matter. Just, it was good to get to a trial. And so I sort of got caught up in that. And Rex was coming along as starting to show a bit of promise as a paddock dog. And I thought, I can get this dog working in the yards. He was a confident dog. He was a pretty forward-moving dog on the sheep and stuff like that. And I remember I've told this story to a few friends over the time, but thought, I'll get this dog backing the sheep in the race. And he wasn't that keen. He was comfortable standing there at the back, but he just wouldn't get up. So I just stood in the race and picked this dog up, and I'd just sort of toss him up on the back of the sheep. So it was 2 weeks of that. And then it was almost like day 1 of week 3. I had him in the race. I don't think I climbed in there. And I said, Rex, get up. And he just went, like this, and jumped up, ran to the front of the, to the front of the race. I said, come back. And he came back and said, let's do it again. And so he just took off from there, and he ended up a pretty good yard dog. I went to a lot of yard trials with him. He was a little bit mouthy, we might say, on occasion. And there certainly probably were a couple of times that the judge might have said, I think that'll do. And so we had to retire early. But he ended up winning a couple of open yard trials for me. So I was very pleased with that. And he was a really competent 3 sheep dog as well. But he also, I still don't know to this day with that dog if it was a lack of confidence, because he was tended to be just that little bit pushy. So, say working an obstacle in the 3 sheep trial, I just had to manage him when he was walking up. At some point I realised that if he was, a certain distance from the sheep, that next step he was going to take, he was going to jump in and move the sheep. So I learnt to manage that fairly quickly so that we didn't end up getting hunted off the trial ground too early. Yeah.
So what was the attraction to 3 sheeping then?
Well, when I sort of got into training dogs and decided that I was going to move out of Sydney and get a place, I just always had I think I've always just had a thing for sheepdogs. So my first dog was going to, for a long period of time, was going to be a Kelpie. And I wanted to get a working Kelpie to do sheepdog stuff with. So I can't remember what the program was, but on the ABC, sheepdog trials were televised. I honestly can't remember how often, but there was always that attraction there. I was always most often at the Royal Easter Show, and always found myself drawn to the sheepdog demonstrations, like Jim Luce. And I didn't know him at the time, but it was often. I particularly remember at Homebush at the RAS site there, watching Jim Luce do sheepdog demonstrations with his dogs, and they were most impressive. And you'd listen intently, and if I was feeling brave enough, I'd just ask him a couple of questions afterwards, like while they're standing around and that sort of stuff. I've just always had that sort of attraction to dogs. Like
just fangirling on the side there when you got your moment.
Yeah.
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 And that attract, like you said, you've just always had like that attraction, but where was there something that like just stimulated it, or just something you went?
Well, I think for me, right from probably as early as I can remember, I've always just admired. I just love dogs as an animal. appropriately, of course, but I think they're amazing animals because there's such a variety of work that they can do, and they do in not just the working, like livestock working dogs, but just broadly, like the assistance dogs and guide dogs, the police type dogs, customs dogs. In the fire brigade, we have 3 accelerant detector dogs. I just find dogs amazing. I love being around them. To me, one of the best things that I can do with my dogs is just go for a walk. And I end up finding that I just start having a conversation with the dogs. They're not necessarily giving me the answers that I want, but they're always listening. And like, for instance, one of the dogs in my little team, this dog called Tyson, he's just that sort of happy dog all the time. So we'll go for a walk like we did today. Just go for a walk, just scoping out the place, admiring my new fence down the front. But he'll be walking along, and then he always just comes back and checks in, and he's just that dog that looks like he's always got a smile on his face. So he always, when he does that, he always seems to come back from the left side, but he's just got to jump up just a little bit, and he's just got to brush his nose past your hand, and then he's happy again. But he'll do that, 10 times in a short sort of space of the walk, and then he'll do his thing for a while, and he'll go, I'll just come back and check in on you. To me, like having dogs around, it's just one of those things that they give you a lot more than what you realise at the time, I think. There'll be those times where the dogs are very perceptive. I've finally learnt, like, if I'm not really in a particularly great mood, it's probably not the best day to take the dogs out and do some training, because it's not going to be a great session. But having said that, you still need to walk the dogs, and they seem to sort of just ground you a little bit in some ways, I think, without sort of getting too deep about it, I suppose. But I've had a couple of dogs over the years that have they've come into my life just at the right time as well. One of them was a Great Dane that I had as a pet, and he ended up moving on to someone else because the poor bugger was treated a little bit more like a sheepdog, whereas he needed to be that dog that was in the house with you all the time. And I ended up finding a new home, a friend of my parents, and they had him for, like, as far as a Great Dane goes, he just passed away recently, but he had a nice life with them, a long life. He lived a bit longer than that average for a Great Dane, but he had a husband and wife, and I think they've got 3 kids. And so one of the kids was a baby when they got him. So this little baby of theirs grew up with this Great Dane. And I think sometimes you get a few dogs pass through your life that have a fair bit of meaning as well.
Yeah,
absolutely. Speaking of, mate, do you want to tell us a little bit about your current team?
Yeah, so I've got so in my team I've got 4 dogs. So we've got 10 dogs at home. So we've got a pet dog. He's a border collie as well, Marley. And so Jackie's got 5 sheep dogs, and I've got 4. So my guys, I've got a dog, Princess Tyson. So Greg gave me this dog as a young pup, not quite 8 years ago. I think he turns 8 next month. So he's a yellow and white border collie. Next dog is Wongabara Boots. So he's one of the first ones that we bred. He's a black and white short-haired border collie. I quite like Boots. He's not the best dog I've had, but he's one of the keenest dogs that I've had, and I think that's one of those key things, finding a dog that's got drive to want to work. But he's also got that talent to press my buttons a fair bit as well. So I just last week or the week before, anyway, we're at Bungendore at the dog trial, and if he has a good run, he'll have a good run. But other times I'll walk off after running that dog and I just feel exhausted because he's just been giving it to me. No, he does. Like, honestly, he just takes the piss sometimes. But yeah, I enjoy, despite that, I still enjoy that dog a lot. And then there's Princess Lexi. I got off Greg as well. She's 6 very soon, I think. And she, without the other dogs knowing, she is by far my favourite dog. I find her very easy to work, and she's very biddable. And then I've got a younger dog that I got off Pit Flower, bit over 6 months ago, 6-7 months ago. So she's just turned 2, and she's the sort of dog that I've been sort of searching for a little bit. When I got her off Pip, she was already started, and Pip said she's just always just sort of pressing the edge of that bubble a little bit on a stock. So I just need to work on keeping her out. Anyway, I sort of made an effort with that, and she's coming along really well. And again, a bit like Boots, she's really eager to work, which I think is important. But I've got to make sure with my personality as well that I don't sort of knock that out of her, so to speak. And then we've got a litter of pups that are 4 weeks old tomorrow. So hopefully there's a couple in there that are going to grow up to be the next champions for Wongaburra. Yeah.
How many are you planning to keep from that litter?
Well, I'm keeping a dog and a bitch pup, and Jackie's going to keep a dog pup out of that as well. And then the other 3 are already got home spoken for, so that's good. So at least we know that having that litter on the ground, and I think even just prior to them hitting the ground, there's interest from a couple of people. So there's sort of that good feeling knowing that the pups will be, when they get to that age, they'll be moving on, and we won't have a full litter of pups at home that we're still trying to juggle and trying to move on, sort of thing. So yeah.
I've been lucky to know you for a few years now, and you're a fairly grounded bloke. Do you find that working for government organisations for so long has kind of put a lot of structure in you, and you try to break that structure back down when you're interacting with your dogs, or rather than be so structured around them?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You're probably right. Particularly like I said, been working for the fire brigade for quite a while, so it sort of becomes that. I don't know if you'd say habit or sort of that culture.
Institutionalized, like
yeah. Like I didn't want to say it like that, like a prisoner, but yeah.
Sorry.
You're probably right, because that's one of the things I think I've learned over the more recent time regarding the dogs is trying to let go a little bit and just
from all the policy procedures that you're into day to day.
Not demand them all the time. Yeah, I think one of the things I think about myself is that I'm a bit of a control freak regarding the dogs. Like I want them to behave well. So if we go to a dog trial, I don't want them running off and disturbing other people, running through someone's camp, or if we've got a young dog, heaven forbid, it ran on the ground and interrupted someone's run or something like that, So yeah, it's probably a good question. Like just being able to let go, I think sometimes I struggle with a little bit because that policy and procedure sort of thing. It's my way or no way, whereas at home it can be another way, and I've just got to allow that to flow a bit, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so we don't get so rigid, right?
Yeah.
Right? Oh,
yeah.
I thought we dropped out for a second.
Yeah, so did I. I was like, what happened there?
So you obviously enjoy your 3 sheep style of dog and paddock dog. Is that purely what you're searching for? Or are you still planning to do like some yard sort of style in there?
My goal would be to
I
be
think
able.
this guy yard trial. He doesn't do too bad.
Yeah, I know.
He doesn't do too bad at all.
My goal would be to, like breeding wise, for instance, to have that sort of utility style of dog.
Mhm.
I probably haven't been doing as much yard trialing as I used to. One, just because of time and work, and particularly well, most of my time in the fire brigade being shift work as well. Like, if you want to go to that trial that weekend, you end up, that's the weekend you're working, so you can't go or whatever. But in more recent years, the dogs that I've had aren't necessarily yardy dogs, but Boots and Tyson, for instance, they've been in a few yard trials, and they've got around, but they're not necessarily the yardy type that I would hope to have to be competitive at a yard trial. They haven't disgraced me, but
Not by any means.
I think a couple of times I've retired with them compared to, and that old dog Rex, he sort of set the bar pretty high because he grew into a yard dog, and he clearly loved it. He sort of loved that sort of that close interaction with the sheep, I suppose, and could move sheep, whereas these two guys in comparison are a little bit more cautious, and sometimes when you want that bit of punch, you almost end up begging it out of them. But like Boots last year, Dubbo Show was on, just entered the local, and he won the local. And so I was really pleased with that, of course. But the sheep, that particular run, the sheep just flowed off him. He didn't end up backing the sheep in the race or anything. They just flowed through, unloading the race. They came out and that sort of stuff. So that they can get around a yard course, but I think the old dog just sort of set that standard that where I'd like my yard dogs to be. I've had a couple of cracks at cattle trials over the years. Old Rex went in them. Another dog I had, Switch, he went in a couple. And Tyson, I think he's been in one when he was a young dog. But I think environment sort of has a bit to do with it as well. Like, we don't have access to cattle, so we don't sort of get to practice that side of things and just introduce the dogs to cattle and how to behave around the cattle, that sort of stuff. So but like in the future, I'm still keen to go down that path, and fingers crossed, like one of these pups might turn out to be that dog that it has a bit more versatility, I suppose.
Yeah.
I can only hope so, right?
Yeah, and that's right. And like, I'll make as much effort as I can to give them the opportunities to get exposed to that sort of stuff. So,
and talking about exposure, mate, like obviously Rex left a mark on you, and you've been exposed to a heap of dogs through yarding and through sheeping. Was there a dog that somebody else has owned that you would have loved to inherit at some stage?
Yeah, and I couldn't tell you the dog's name. There's a particular trial I went to many years ago. It was the Orange Show, and there was a yard trial there, and it was belting down rain. So the yard trial was set up just at the edge of the show jumping arena. The show jumping was called off. It was that wet. Anyway, Robert Cox and Tony Mutton ended up in the final. I think Tony had two dogs in the final, but anyway, this is in the open, and him and Coxie were in the final. I'm pretty sure that's right. And it was wet enough that one of them didn't have gumboots, so they were sharing gumboots. And I don't know if Robert remembers, but anyway, I remember definitely in the final and the first round, both of Tony's dogs, they had an awesome run, and the sheep were heavy. They were, they were wet. They were muddy. The course itself was sort of, ankle deep mud, that sort of stuff. And clearly he had a great run, and the judge was using a clicker, And Tony may have said to the judge, "Oh, how was that?" And I can't remember who the judge was, but he just showed him the clicker, and it was a 98 or 99 run. Anyway, watching the dog in the final, the sheep were in the force, and they're at the balk gate for the drenching race, and they were sort of knotted up. And he called his dog up, and you saw the dog just jump up on the sheep, and then it just sort of took stock of what was happening for him, and it looked down, and you could see the dog. And I know it wasn't thinking like this, but sort of putting those human sort of thoughts on it, you could see the dog thinking, right, this sheep is facing this way, but if I try and move that one, it's actually going to move the wrong way. So I'm going to move this one, and it's going to start the flow. And so in the final, he ran a 98 or 99 as well. And I wish I knew that dog's name, but that would be the dog that I'd want to take, or everyone would want to take home every day of the week. And given that it was really tough conditions as well, it was just amazing to be there to see it. So it was most impressive, yeah.
He's had some handy dogs, and he's a pretty good handler as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
He actually has commands for his dogs to switch them to each side of the race as they're moving up and down the race.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, I've never ever heard of anyone else doing that before. But yeah, someone told me, and I said, "No, that's bullshit." And I was like, "Oh yeah," he goes, "Yeah, I do it because of this." And yeah, like the control he has like on his dog, so it doesn't surprise me that he's got a dog to that, or the dog capability you just mentioned.
Seeing that run that I was describing, I'd absolutely believe that. But the thing that was most impressive and it was a number of years ago now, like old Rex was still alive then, so it was a long time ago, but that little part, untying the knot at the balk gate, that was all the dog just working out the problem by itself. And my memory of it, it was probably just an instant where the dog jumped up and did a couple of things on the back of the sheep and untied the knot straight away and got the flow going. But like thinking back on it, it sort of happened in slow motion, and you could see the cogs ticking over in the dog's mind. It was just brilliant, yeah. And clearly, that's a reflection of Tony training the dog and bringing the dog up and giving it the experience that it needed to get to that point. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So you said what you're breeding towards, but are you liking a team of similar dogs or different dogs, like different strengths and weaknesses within that team?
Yeah, probably. Well, those dogs that I mentioned that I've got now, they all are different in their own ways, personality and working style to a certain extent. Probably Tyson and Lexi, for instance, they've got the same father, Princess Timmy, different mothers. They're a little bit similar in their style, where they're probably a little bit naturally arky around their sheep. But having said that, if for instance, if they're at the same distance off the sheep, they have a different effect on the sheep. Sheep seem to, I guess it's the dog's presence. Like if they were running on an arc, a similar arc off the sheep in the middle of the ground, the sheep react differently to Tyson compared to Lexi. But getting back to the question, I think a similar sort of dog probably suits me from the point of view that it's got to suit my personality as well. I can offend dogs very easily, just raising my voice kind of thing. So I've got to have that dog that can accept that. And these guys that I've got now do, whereas dogs in the past, it mightn't have worked out the same way, I suppose. Like that, I mentioned the dog briefly before. Switch, he's the father of Boots. He's probably the best dog I never had. probably around 3 years of age, I started to sort of tighten the screws on him a little bit too much, and he just went sour, and he was never the same dog after that. But like, he took me through a few yard trials. I think he got into a novice final. Actually, I think it was down in Sydney, Dan, before the Supreme down there. Yard trial was on a bit earlier that year. I think he got a novice final down there. So I've had a number of dogs over the years, and I've always thought, oh yeah, I just need that hard-headed dog, so that'll suit me because I'm a little bit similar in a way that it's my way or no way. But I've started to learn in the last few years that doesn't really suit, because I end up just arguing with the dog the whole time, so we don't get anywhere. Whereas the sort of, I guess, that sort of medium kind of dog, they're probably a little bit more biddable, but at the same time, because they are a little bit more biddable, I'm not having those arguments with them either.
Yeah.
Is that why you still got a team of collies instead of a few kelpies there, or?
Say again?
Is that why you have a team of collies rather than collies? Something that you're not going to argue with as much, rather than kelpies. Sorry.
I had a kelpie recently, and I moved him on, but not so much because we were arguing together. Like, I really liked him. He's a really nice personality kind of thing, very friendly dog. But the way he's shaping up, I don't think he was going to be what I was after trial-wise, particularly that I don't need a dog for full-time work. Yep. I think he was the sort of dog that probably needed more regular work, and so he'd be tired at the end of each day, and I didn't have that for him. And I've had a few other kelpies over the years, particularly in the early days. I had a couple of kelpies that I got off Anne Leonard, and they were shaping up great, but one got run over and the other one broke his leg and had to get put down because of the injury. But they were the dogs that I was hoping to get, that sort of utility style, like they were shaping up that way. Accidents got in the way and sort of cut that a little bit short. Yeah. So, but yeah, I won't say no to a kelpie. Like, we have border collies at home. Jackie would probably say something different. She likes the border collies a little bit better, but I think they are slightly different. I remember a few years ago, I got a kelpie off Robert Cox, and I rang him up at some point, and I bought the pup off him and rang him up and just said, "Oh, I'm probably going to move her on." And he said, "Oh, that's no worries. Like, she's your dog." And I said, "I was just ringing to let you know." And he said, "Oh, so what's going on?" And I just said, "Oh, such and such." And he said, "Just remember, she's a kelpie, not a border collie." Great talk on the phone, just sort of with some training stuff. And as soon as I hung up, I went straight over to the training area with her, and sort of did what Robert said, and the dog loosened up. But anyway, as it turned out, there's a fellow across the road that was after a new dog at the time, and so he took her on, and we actually we did a swap because he happened to. I think he drove up one day and said, "Oh, have you got any dogs? Because I need to start looking for a new dog just to replace the old one." And I said, "Oh, well, I do actually. I've got this young kelpie." Anyway, he had a look at her, and she looked okay on the sheep. And I said, "Oh, well, I noticed you got some lambs over there at the moment. How about we do a swap and I'll get a ram lamb off you?" And so we did that. So that worked out all right. So, yeah.
Bit of wheeling and dealing.
Yeah.
And talking about that guy having older dogs there, mate, you and Jackie have got the retired
Working Dogs Australia.
Yeah.
So
tell us a bit how that come to be.
That sort of came about one night again, just a few years ago now, just talking about dogs at the end of the day on the veranda. And we were sort of having the conversation about the group of dogs we had at the time. Like, what are we going to do when they get old? Because at some point you want to replace those older dogs so that you can keep moving on with, going to trials and training that young dog. But there's only so many dogs you can have at home. We actually rang up Anne Moy and asked if she knew of something like that on Facebook at the time, and there wasn't. So Anne actually sort of set the page up, and I think within an hour of talking to Anne, it was on Facebook. So it's moved on, and the idea with Retired Working Dogs Australia is that it's pretty much a connection point for people that might have that older dog that they want to rehome, and they can put some details up, a couple of pictures of the dog, and it might get some interest, and someone might say, yeah, we're looking forward to taking on an older dog. And in the early days when we were telling a few people about it, particularly it was interesting talking to some older people that might be retired and that sort of thing, that always have a connection with dogs, that there is a lot more interest for an older dog than what I realized anyway, because you get a young pup, you got to, like, if you're going to let it inside, you got to house train it. It's going to be chewing everything, biting your ankles and all that sort of stuff, whereas people of the older generation might
want to get past that.
That's track. Exactly right. So you're taking on a dog that's gone through all that, whether they're actually a house dog or not. From some stories that we've got back through that group, that Facebook group, there've been some great success stories. We've actually retired a couple of dogs ourselves through it, and those dogs have adjusted to that new life, and given the dogs are older, their energy levels are starting to decrease as well, so they don't need to be running 20 k's a day just to get that energy out. They're happier to sit around in the sun and go for a nice leisurely walk and that sort of stuff. So it's been a pretty good thing.
It's a fantastic thing.
Yeah. So one of the things, you get the occasional person that gets offended, but we approve the posts that go on there. So occasionally we'll get people trying to sell pups through it and that sort of stuff. So those ones get declined. So the idea is it's for retired livestock dogs. And that's where we want to keep the focus. And like I said, it's just that connection point for people trying to rehome a dog and someone that might like to take a dog on, in their twilight years, I suppose.
Mate, what I actually haven't told you before, I actually did rehome a dog through that group. And I stay in contact with that bloke every couple of months. I actually just spoke to him the other day. He rang me. And it's a dog that actually meant a lot to me. It still does. And just to see the joy that he brings this particular semi-retired bloke, and he's got some property, and he lives in Sydney, and then he goes down to his property on a Thursday, comes back on a Sunday night, and dog gets a little bit of work still. And he's like, man, this dog is the best bloody dog I've ever had. Like, he's an old European fella, and he's just absolutely in love with this dog. And, without a page like that, I wouldn't have seen that person ask for a dog and me go, you know what, this dog would probably suit that bloke, and get in contact. We're actually going to take contact with his missus. And, he's just absolutely smitten, proper in love with this dog. And I get photos, and he's probably put on a couple of kgs, but, he gets to go for his run. And I don't know that he's got the control that I used to have on him anymore from some of the stories I hear, but he's living out his best life.
That's right. As long as the dog's still in a safe place and someone's taking care of them, that's the important thing. And, it sort of gives you that good feeling as well yourself, like if you've moved a dog on. So I think it's 2 dogs from us that we've found new homes for through the page, and it's been really good. A couple of them, one of them is actually in Dubbo, and we went out the other night just with some of Jackie's work friends, and I said to one of the girls there, I said, how's Switch going? And she said, because they've recently had a baby. She's about 15 months old or so, young May, and she pulled up this photo, and it was just the back of Switch in the photo, but their little toddler was just resting up against his back. That's pretty good. Like, he's always a very friendly dog, but it just shows you how adaptable the dogs are as well, because they didn't really, well, that dog particularly didn't really grow up around children, because we don't have any kids of our own, and so our dogs generally don't see small kids, but it's been a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I don't know about like you, but when I looked at it, I went, well, that dog's here. I'm not going to trial him anymore. He's going to be a bit of a house pet, live days in the kennel, compared to just being out and just, not confined. Like, just go and do his thing. And, you see a couple of, for that particular dog, he kind of lost his pecking order here. And you can see like the younger dogs coming through, giving him a bit of a hard time. Like, I don't know, just the self-satisfaction, pretty cool.
Oh, that's right. The dogs, they just sort of get that full of life.
Like another gear, right?
That's exactly right. Like another dog that we had, she used to go to the pub. She used to go on boat rides down at Brow Waters in the Tints, across Brow Waters down the bottom there, and go to the cafe and all that sort of stuff. So, she's having a great time, whereas at home, she was still having a nice time, but just all that extra stimulation that she's getting with all the different sights and sounds and interacting with different people, etc. They weren't getting that with us because, we might have had a younger dog that was sort of replacing that dog in the working team. So all the focus was on the younger ones. So we're pretty pleased where that Facebook group's gone. So hopefully it keeps going, and it just sort of. I think the other thing as well, one of the things that we were talking about, working dogs and farmers, and they mightn't have that sort of great reputation because, dogs don't have the best life. We sort of, we were thinking ourselves that if we can contribute a little bit to breaking down that stigma, and you've probably seen it yourself.
Had this conversation just yesterday, mate. Someone said that all farmers don't look after the dogs, and if they don't suit out, like they don't suit where they go over Rainbow Bridge. No, that's not the case. Like,
and that's right. And there's a lot more value put on the dogs as well. It's surprising how many people you talk to now. These the last few years, with the extra care and the extra steps they take to make sure their dogs are able to perform at their peak, going to the dog chiropractors and that stuff. It's not just the once-off visit to the vet. A lot of people are taking that sort of preventative sort of action so that the dogs maintain, their peak condition, I suppose. And we think the same. Like one of our dogs, like you probably know the brand Laura Back on Track with the horse rugs and stuff like that. They do dog rugs as well. So one of our dogs, she gets that in winter, which she's got it on tonight. And in the colder months when we're at a trial, she has that jacket on as well. But all of our dogs have jackets if it's cold enough. Like if we get a cold snap through Dubbo, they'll be rugged up and sort of stuff. It's just a matter of if they chew the jackets up or not.
That's the biggest thing. But I think a lot of it is people are just becoming more accepting of admitting that they actually look after their dogs, which then makes other people look at themselves and go, oh, maybe I should be doing that too. Or, I can talk about that then. Like, I think,
100%.
like, things like this and just general chit chat around places, it's making people sort of step back and go, oh, maybe I'm not the only one that does that, or
and it sort of frees up the conversation, I suppose, and that's right.
We sit here every week on these very uncomfortable chairs, and I'm cracking my back and my neck all bloody session. In the last 6 weeks, I think my dog's been 4 chiropractic or massages, and I've never been one in my life.
Yeah,
I've never been to a chiropractor, and my dogs are getting more attention than I am.
Yeah.
It's great to see people looking after their dogs, and anyone that thinks that working dogs don't get looked after, I think they probably need to have a look at the stigma and break things down a bit.
Mm.
Do you want to get that question from Jai?
Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah. So Jai Middleton's asked, have you ever been tempted to leave the security of the fire brigade job to go and chase a full-time career in the ag industry where you would have the opportunity to work with your dogs every day? Or have you found that you're able to do on your own days off from the brigade is enough to scratch that itch? And I know that Jai himself, I'm pretty sure he's a paramedic, so I think this one relates back to him quite well.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Dan and I were talking about it just the other week as well. I've thought about that a lot over the years, and the honest answer is no, I haven't been brave enough. But having said that as well, particularly when I was on shift work, it did allow me to scratch that itch very well. Sometimes it'd come at the cost of not being able to go away for a weekend to a trial. But particularly when I was on shift work, it allowed me time at home with the hobby farm side of things to work the dogs and do other stuff, whether it's like this place we're on now. We've been here for 3 years, and it's a bit of a slow process just setting stuff up just with time, but it would give me time to do those things. And certainly in the last few years, or sort of few years before, I suppose, say running our own dog trial, given the days off that I had, it allowed other things to happen regarding setting up the dog trial and things like that, or night shifts at the fire station were a great time where I spent a bit of time on the computer. I'll take my laptop in and do some finishing touches for the trial, that sort of stuff, and make preparations. So then when the entries closed, for instance, Jackie and I could do the draw when the time came for that sort of stuff. But to be perfectly honest, I think the other thing is that I'm in that sort of comfortable spot, being a fiery as well. I didn't have that background growing up in the rural sector, and I know I'd enjoy that style of work, but I think perhaps having a drop in pay I'd find a little bit hard as well.
Yeah.
For the age, and that's I'm not saying that's the right answer for everyone. You've got to do what's right for yourself, of course, and your circumstances around that. But the more I could do with dogs, the better. If I had my time again, it might have been different as a young bloke, but I don't think at this stage I'll be changing anytime soon anyway.
That's very fair.
Who knows what the future's got to hold, mate?
Yeah, that's right.
Another question here from Tracy Lindsay. She's asked, or she said she's getting a Ripper little pup soon, which I think I might know where that one's coming from.
It's really called Tracy.
She's asked, how do you start pups off for 3 sheep?
Good question, Tracy. Thank you. So I just can't help myself with pups. As soon as they sort of look like they're big enough, I've got to take them to the sheep.
I did this morning. I know exactly what he's talking about.
But I'll probably take the pups to the sheep. I'll pop the sheep in the round yard. We've got a bit of a setup here, and I'll take the pups to the round yard and just let them have a look at the sheep. So, like this litter of pups that we've got here at the moment, when they're a bit older, I'll jam the sheep in the round yard. I'll probably just take the pups down to outside the fence and see what they think. But moving on from that, starting a dog for 3 sheep sort of stuff. If I was going to train a yard dog, my groundwork would be the same. Those foundation training skills would be the same, and so I'll probably start answering the question with that. Whether I want a dog to work in the yards or work in the paddock, they need to know their left command, their right command, stop, come in, get out sort of command. And so I'm going to do that the same way. And then there's some other things like working in the race that you'll introduce to the dog at some point. But what I would probably like to do with the dog, or what I have done and will do in the future as well, is off sheep, I'll start to teach the dog its name so that I can get a bit of a recall on the dog. And, you talk about dry training. We probably do more dry training than what we realise, just, say reinforcing that pup's name. And at some point during that, as the pup's coming along, I'll teach it to stop. So I like to do that just on a lead, taking the dog for a walk, and then I'll stop and just put a little bit of pressure on the lead so that the pup feels that, and they have to stop walking as well. I'll just say stop. So that when it comes time, when the pup's in with the sheep, that I hopefully, if it's starting to balance up a little bit and move around its sheep, I can get in a position to try and stop it, but then also call it off the sheep. So I guess that probably with that as well, it's not something that happens overnight. That's over a period of time. But then I don't know if I'm saying this in a particular order, but you want to let that pup start to move around its sheep, so start to balance, and then you're going to sort of help that dog learn how to balance. I guess one of the things coming through, particularly spending a fair bit of time with Greg Prince, so I was always around at his place just giving him a hard time. But one of the things he probably reinforced with me is that the dog doesn't know what you want it to do, so you've got to help show it what to do. So once the pup's probably starting to get old enough to train, it might be coming on to 6 months or so, and it's starting to move freely around the sheep, is that, if you're starting to move one way, it's going to balance off you or move off you, is showing that pup how to do that. And I suppose one of the other things is trying to be patient with that. Like if you have two dogs from the same litter or two pups from the same litter, they're probably going to progress at a different rate.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose more broadly is that, from that point, how do you get to casting your dog and that sort of stuff as well? So, that takes it to the next sort of step as well. When you think that pup's at that sort of point in its training where you can take it out into that bigger space. One of the things, and I'll probably myself, and again, it's that sort of controlling thing I need to let go of a little bit, is sometimes I think I might hold the dogs in that small area just a smidge too long. And so in doing that, and I've sort of just started to realize this in the last couple of years, is that I sort of unintentionally shut them down a bit because I'm sort of pressuring that young dog a little bit too much. So I guess being patient with the dog, letting it work a bit, and not trying to over control it in those early days, and letting it gather your stock, which all these dogs are. They're a heading dog, so their natural desire should be to go around the sheep and bring them to you. If they're not doing that automatically, which is, some will do that, but some won't. So you just have to help show them how to get around the other side of their sheep or cattle or whatever it might be. That's probably a starting point with that young dog.
And you're talking about like whether it's yard or three sheep, it doesn't matter. He's got the same basics, or same foundation. Do you put any emphasis on pushing out a young dog to get distance at a young age?
I think I probably found that it's a little bit delicate. So, that ideal dog that I'd like to have would be one that's probably on the front foot and coming in a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I've found, and particularly like with the young dog that I got off Pip, for instance, where she said it was just punching inside the bubble a little
I was
bit,
just going to touch on that. Yeah.
is that getting yourself in that right position to kind of gently get that dog out rather than just jumping on it. It certainly helps shape the dog and shape that movement around. But if you do it in the right way, you can do it while still maintaining contact with the sheep. So, for instance, a lot of people use a rake or a stick while they're training the dogs in that closer area, and even when they start to get out in the paddock. And I do too, but one of the things I like to learn with myself is I won't let the stick come out of my hand these days, whereas previously I'd want to try and push the dog out. So pushing the dog to me was taking the stick and trying to hit the dog at the feet sort of thing, and it was completely unproductive because at that point I was just losing my temper, and the dog knew that before I even let the stick go. So now I'm a lot more conscious of trying to get in that right position to help that dog get out. So if I can get around the sheep to be in between the dog and the sheep to help shape them outwards a bit more, I've found that a lot more effective. And like most of the training with the dogs, particularly in early stages before they learn to work off balance and that sort of stuff, is getting yourself in that right position to be able to help shape the dog. I've had great conversations with Coxie about it. And he said, I hate it when people talk about pushing their dog around from one side to the other, where he likes to use a backhand style sort of action. And particularly when you're talking about working in the yards, like that conversation with Robert, you can, and particularly in a trialing sort of situation, you can see why that backhand sort of movement makes sense. But the point being, it's still about positioning. So that, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. So how quickly do you try and get a dog outside in a larger area opposed to a small yard?
It depends on the individual dog a little bit. I'd like to know if I've let that young dog out into the bigger area, that if things go pear-shaped, I can just call the dog back. If they're not quite up to coming back with the excitement of the sheep running around, if they've decided to just jam it into the sheep and chase them all over the place, I'd like to be able to shut that down pretty quick. And so at some point you've got to test it. But age, I probably couldn't put an age on it as such. But sometimes I'll do that
situation and everything.
That's right. Sometimes I'll just give that a little bit of a go just to see if it livens the dog up a bit as well. Like if they seem a little bit quiet in that small area, I might let the sheep out through the gate and see if the sheep running through the gate just sort of ignites a bit more interest in them. I may have an older dog out there just to try and hold things up a little bit. It's not really age dependent so much as, based off the individual at the time.
And then once you get your dog sort of, a few commands on it and get it going and know that it's not going to, chase a sheep and all the rest, do you try to work, especially for 3 sheep, do you try and work your dog out in a paddock more so than in a small yard? Or what's your day-to-day sort of thing of bringing a dog up and through and ready for a 3 sheep?
Well, during the training sort of part of it, as they're getting closer to sort of trial ready, I suppose, some of the things that I like to do is work the dog along a fence at some point. So I've still just got, again, it's that controlling sort of side of things. I know the fence has got that side covered, so the sheep aren't going to run off that way, and I can have a little bit of influence on the, this side of the fence, for instance, and work that side. So I might get the dog to bring the sheep along the fence and keep walking in one direction. And then as that sort of exercise is progressing, then I'll get the dog to go through the sheep, between the sheep and the fence, and come back around. If it sort of depends on the individual a little bit, but if they're sort of finding, or if I'm noticing that they're not comfortable in close to the sheep, I might actually take them back into the small area just to get more comfortable with that sort of situation. So, like, in that trial situation at an obstacle, the dog might have to be in closer and working in closer quarters with the sheep. I'll try and bring out a little bit more confidence in them that way. But certainly at some point you have to be brave enough to take them out the paddock and just hope all your training's sort of paid off, because that's that great test is with that new, or that young dog that's going to have its first hit out. They always run 100 at home before their first trial. But that trial ground's different. The sheep are different. How many times has that dog just travelled to a trial with you previously and things like that? And I every time I walk out to the peg, I suffer with nerves pretty bad. So the dogs know that as well. And I just hope things don't go pear-shaped. All those things sort of add up to what's going to happen in that next instant when the bell goes, kind of thing. So one of the things I'd probably concentrate on a little bit more with that younger dog leading up to a trial is just getting a cast out of them. So I've got a couple of different things I like to do with that, to, fingers crossed it all works out the way it does at home on the trial ground. So and for me personally, with my own dogs, I know at that point, like, I've got to call off on them and stuff like that, so I don't have to go chasing around the paddock if things go pear-shaped. Yeah.
Or emergency handbrake.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It might take a bit of yanking to pull it right on, but at some point.
Question here from John Starr. He's asked, do you think putting too much pressure and commands on the young dog can take the dog or natural work out of the dog?
Yeah, absolutely. This dog I mentioned before, Switch, he's the grandfather of these pups we've got at the moment. I got him as a pup, and started training him. Everything was coming along well, and at some point I just started demanding too much of that dog too early. And so I think he probably at his first run, he was close to 2 years old. He was ready for it, but it was just a matter of getting to a trial. And probably between the age of 2 and 4, I just thought, well, you should be, winning an open trial. And he certainly wasn't ready for it mentally. And I shut that dog down 100%. And Greg said to me, don't talk to that dog, just use your whistle, because it was quite clear when I used my voice commands. You could see the dog just drop his shoulders immediately, because he knew that, some expletives were going to come out of the mouth or whatever. Whereas using the whistle, didn't have that emotion attached to it. But I ruined that dog 100%. And he was probably going to be that dog I was always hoping to get. Too many commands, absolutely. Like, I don't have a lot of commands on the dogs as such, but you can certainly, I think the thing that I've probably learned over the last few years is trying to leave the dogs alone a little bit. If they're moving, if you've given them a command to go that way and they're moving that way, well, let them get there rather than telling them to go there and go there and go there. Just let them get there. And then once they get there, make your next decision on what you're going to do. Do you need to stop them? Do you need them to move on a bit more or come back around the other way so that, particularly again, for me, just talking about trial stuff, are the sheep still flowing in the right direction? And I think if you manage that well, as the dog matures more, they can take that, take a bit more pressure from you as they get older. They learn a bit more resilience. So I know these, like the 3 trialing dogs, well, the 3 dogs are on the trial ground at the moment. Like I'm always in their ear with the whistle, but they can handle that now as well. Whereas when they were younger, certainly not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find why do you constantly get in their ear? What is the reasoning behind that with your whistle?
I just think I know better.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I think I'm
very
still,
honest. So.
Yeah, you're not going to get anything but that from John.
I'm still evolving. I'm still not evolving. I'm still learning. And I think just the other week down at Bungendore, I didn't really come home with a score, I don't think. But there are a couple of times the dogs are doing their thing, and I just let them go, and they were doing the right thing. I just find it hard to shut my mouth, really. So,
do you think that's a trust thing with your dog?
Say again?
Do you think that's a trust sort of thing with your dog, or?
No, yes and no.
A character trait.
I think it's a character flaw in me, if anything. I know what I want to get out of a run, for instance, and each time I walk out, like I said to Jackie the other day, the young dog I got off Pip, that was the first hit out, and Jackie and I having a debrief at home, and I said to Jackie, do you want to win a trial when you go out? And she said, with one of the dogs I do, with the others I just want to have a good run. So poor Wing, that's the dog's name, Wing, that was the first run, and I wanted to win the novice trial with her. So I had these great expectations walking in. I can't help it. I sort of get a bit competitive, I suppose. But I also am very aware of the, on that trial ground situation, the position of the sheep. And if they've moved too far one way or the other, I can't help but get wound up about it. And I want the dog to, for instance, if they're just being that bit pushy, I want the dog to stop and take that pressure off the sheep straight away, so that the sheep will hopefully settle down and we'll get control of that situation again, so we can, get back on course or try and tidy it up as best we can to get a bit of a run, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Do we grab that question from John? It ties in with what John was just saying now.
Yep. So Jai's asked, what's the main reason you and Jackie run separate teams of dogs? Is it a difference in preference of style / type of dog, training habits, or do you find they're just better off working for one handler only?
That's a fair question. I think part of it is just training our own dogs and getting that satisfaction of particularly with a pup. Like we've got this litter of pups at the moment, and fingers crossed everything will go right with those guys. And going from that early stage to not completion, but I suppose it's the next starting phase of getting to the trial ground with that dog and having its first run. Jackie and I are very different as well. Jackie is, I'm probably a little bit more experienced with the sheepdog side of things, but Jackie is clearly a better trainer. And it's...
this has been recorded, right?
Yeah. So hopefully...
I just want to make sure you knew. Please say that.
Yeah. But Jackie has a lot more patience with the dogs as well. And so we... our individual dogs are interesting. That they're all friendly. They all sort of do what they're told to do, when you're at home or whatever. But if we're both standing there and Jackie's standing over here and I call one of her dogs, they might come to me. Or if I call them, they'll just go straight to Jackie. If I'm standing there and my dogs are over there and Jackie calls one of my dogs, I'll go, oh, yeah, no worries, we'll come to you as well. So really quite different. Yeah, Jackie's, got the appeal for the dogs, I guess, as far as they're concerned. But having said that, Tyson, Jackie's run him a few times while she's still in the encourage, and he's probably had better runs with Jackie than what he has with me. And one thing I'm pleased about is that it shows that his training, he understands his commands completely. So if Jackie tells him to go around or go back, it means the same whether it's coming from me. But he's still, as far as the team's concerned, he's still clearly my dog. Like you can see he has eyes for me, sort of thing. But I think it's probably more just the personal side of things. Like I said, just that the satisfaction of training your own dog is what the reason why we have our own dogs in the team. Yeah.
Speaking of, how do you go about picking a pup for yourself?
Oh, yeah, geez. That's the $1 question, isn't it? Yeah.
You and Jackie, you ever pick the same pup and then there's a bit of an arm wrestle, or?
Well, surprisingly not. Jackie was not going to take a pup.
She'll win? Or?
Well, yeah, of course, she'll get what she wants. Jackie wasn't going to take a pup from this litter, and she admitted at some point she might suffer from FOMO, so she's keeping one, and I'm glad she is. This is actually this litter. It's a repeat mating. We had a bit of bad luck with the last litter, so there weren't as many pups available. So we've got 6 of them this time. So, but yeah, picking a pup. For me, I'll probably have a bit of an idea that, for instance, like with this litter of pups, I wanted a darker coloured pup, and so I've sort of picked a couple that have got the most. They're black and white, except for one that's white with a few black spots. But I've picked the pups that have got the most black on them, and like I said, they're 4 weeks old, so they're all adorable. So it's pretty hard to pick them. But picking a pup to me, I think it's an individual thing. You might like that bold pup that comes flying up to the edge of its pen and jumping up and jumping on your leg, or you might like that pup that's sitting at the back of the group, sort of watching what's going on, then slowly makes its way over. I'm probably a little bit more superficial than that, and I'll pick a pup because I like the look of it. As long as it's not scared and running away, and if I went to your place to pick a pup, and as long as it wasn't screaming when I picked it up, but I picked that one because particularly with your dogs, Dan, they're Kelpies, and in my opinion, Kelpies have to have pointy ears. If that pup had its ears sticking up and that sort of thing, and it had bright eyes, I'd probably be drawn to that. But yeah, it's just that mystery because you can't tell. You need to give that dog or that pup some time to grow and develop to show you what it's got. So I don't know of any secret formula except for going for what attracts you. Because I think the important thing is down the track a little bit. If you thought that I'm going to go and get a black and white border collie, for instance, and I want it to be a male, and then you get a yellow and white female border collie with floppy ears and long hair, and that's exactly the opposite of what you said you wanted. That might be laid down the track, might be enough of an excuse of, well, that's the dog that I didn't want, and now you're just doing everything against what I want you to do. And so, potentially you just have that little bit of an excuse to not be happy with the dog.
Yeah, that's right. You look for more flaws, right?
Yeah, you make that excuse in your own mind. So I'm glad we're keeping out of this litter 3 pups, for instance, so that we can sort of see how they go as well. Because we've had these little guys right from the start, just to see how they develop as well.
Just having a bit of a chuckle to myself because you mentioned I love my pointy ears of my dogs. I've got a dog here that I recently just got in my team, and he's got floppy ears. It's the only thing I don't like about him. But I've just figured out why he doesn't listen to me as much, because he can't hear me because his ears aren't.
That's just an excuse. That's
what we're just talking about, excuses, right?
Yeah.
He's fantastic.
Collie as well.
Sorry?
Is he a border collie?
No, my collie's got the straightest ears of any dog in my team. But as the Kelpie, that's normally I can't do it. I'm just like, I get stuck on that. But there's something about this dog I really like. So, yeah, it's just, but it's made like you can, like if you start to pick on something and then you always find something else, and it'll snowball, right?
That's right. And it's not fair on the dog then, long term.
100%.
Because the most likely outlook for that dog is it's probably going to be a good dog. But if you've always got that excuse in the way that, it's not doing this, it's not doing that, it's probably better off with someone else where it is going to click.
Yep.
And be allowed to shine, and that new person will get the most out of it. Like many years ago, I can't remember what his name was, but I got a red and tan Kelpie off Anne Leonard, and anyways, got him as a pup and started training him. But we just didn't like each other. Like if he was in the back of the ute, the ute I had then was just had a big cage on the back, and all the dogs are in the back. Every time I walked to the back of the ute, that dog would back off the other way. And anyway, I said to Anne, I might send him back because we just don't get on. Anyway, she was telling me there was no worries, and she said, send him back, that's okay. And anyway, fella rung her up, and he'd got a couple of dogs off Anne before, and he always got bitches. That's just what he liked to have in his working dogs. And he said, I've got a job I need to do. Have you got any dogs at the moment? Because I'm out of dogs. And she said, I've got a red and tan male here. You can give him a try if you want. And anyway, the bloke took him. He had, I can't remember the stats, but he had a stack of woolly wethers in an 800-acre paddock or something, or whatever it was. And anyway, he took the dog. The dog got the job done. And he actually wanted to borrow the dog off Anne for the couple of weeks. And anyway, it turned out he rang up and said, this dog's fantastic. Can I buy him off you and keep him? Because that dog just found the right person, and they got on really well. And I presume, had the dog for quite a while, and the dog was working well for him. But the dog would work for me, but we just weren't mates. And so just was that sort of uncomfortable situation where we both agreed to disagree, kind of thing.
Well, it wasn't a fun work environment.
No, that's right. And the dog didn't do anything wrong. We just didn't click, and so the best thing for the dog was to go to a place where he did click with the person, and it worked out well.
Absolutely. Mate, and we mentioned earlier about your position there in New South Wales sheepdog workers. Wait, but you're a judge in both the yard and the 3 sheep. What do you take away from judging?
Yeah, I really enjoy judging. I suppose one of the takeaway things is when you start judging, you clearly have to watch a lot of runs, and so you start to see maybe common areas where people struggle a little bit with their dogs. And when you're back at home, you start to think about your own dogs, and are they doing a similar thing? And so you start thinking about strategies to train the dog a bit better, so you don't encounter those problems. I enjoy judging as well because it's one way to sort of give back to the sport as well, because for the competition side of it, you need to have someone that's available to judge for the weekend and that sort of thing. So I do enjoy that as well. But probably got to say this as well. It's pretty important. Like Jackie's been a real support for me in trialing and judging. And so particularly weekends where we've both been away at the same trial and I've been judging, so we'll take all the dogs with us. Jackie's got to look after all the dogs for the weekend. My dogs may, if I'm judging an open, I may run my novice dogs in the novice event, but if it's a one ring trial, I won't be running the dogs. So she's got to look after all the dogs while we're away. From my point of view, it's very appreciated, but me judging for a weekend, Jackie's also supporting me judging for the people that are running the dogs that weekend as well. So that's a really great help for everyone. But I find it a privilege to judge because at some point I got nominated to be a judge, and then being asked to judge a trial, I think is an honour. So I've been lucky enough to judge the New South Wales Championships. I judged the maiden at the National last year and judged the Open down at Croydon last year, I think, as well. So, I'm kind of proud of that. Sometimes you might feel a little bit of, I don't know so much about feeling pressure judging, but it's one of the important things is when judging that, the first dog that comes out, you have to have in your mind what that perfect run's going to be so that you can judge to that. And like, the scoring system, you start with 100 points and you lose points throughout the course unless you have a perfect run. So that first dog that comes out and the last dog in that final that you judge, you have to judge the same way. So you've got to be able to concentrate for that period of time. But I think one of the things sometimes that I find when I am judging, this is just me, but I just love free running dogs and watching a dog moving around the outside of the sheep, particularly at a little bit of distance, and watching the dog get there with purpose. Sometimes I get caught up in just watching the dog.
What do you mean by, I was just going to go back a step. What do you mean by free running dog?
Well, I guess that dog that needs to get to that point of control on its stop that moves out with purpose, and I suppose when I say free running, that the handler may have given that dog the command to go right or go left, but they haven't had to keep kicking that dog on to get there. The dog understands its mission, and it's also taken the command to go that way. And it might have been that you could have seen the situation where the dog's gone, well, I'll go this way, but in actual fact, the better option is to go against that instinct, because part of that, particularly on the competition ground, is that you want to keep the passage of the sheep on course, and the handlers pulled the dog around the other way, and the dog hasn't fought them. It's taken that command well and moved on. I think sometimes, I'll watch that dog for a moment as a spectator, just because it is free running. This is just my opinion of it, but just watching that dog get around to that point, you just go, it just felt good to look at. And if it worked out well that the dog's taken up that position well, it hasn't sliced in and pushed the sheep over here and cost a couple of points, it's really satisfying to see. Just me watching. Like sometimes, and you don't want to do it when you're judging anyway, and I don't. but sometimes you just feel like saying to the person and the dog, "Oh, thanks. It was just." Yeah.
So I know, like, you're a yard judge. Have you had the privilege of judging a yard trial yet?
No, I haven't. I think we were talking about the other day. We did that judges school
We've done a course together, yeah.
West Wyalong a couple of years ago now. No, I haven't. But Josh Marshall, he judged the utility trial at Yagara last year, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he rang up and we had a chat about judging in the yard section. And so, yeah, we had a good chat about it. We'll certainly be looking forward to judging some yard trials in the future.
I'm sure we can arrange that somewhere, mate. But my question was going to be, because I suppose where I was going with that was having the 3 sheep where you know where your points are and what's going to happen, compared to a yard trial where things are at judge's discretion. How do you think you'd be able to? How will you change in that, and or will anything we judge differently because of that?
Well, I think the clear thing that's different is the space in where the course is set up. So, you know, the same principles of, you know, if that pick up and draw of the sheep, you want them to come down the middle of that open area. And, you know, depending on the setup of the course, you might say, righto, well, you know, you start here as the handler in the middle and I want the sheep brought down your right-hand side. You know, I guess similar in principle to bringing them down a particular side of a casting peg, for instance. You know, if you're positioned in the right spot, you're going to see if the sheep are moving off that line. So, you know, rather than 8 meters on a 3 sheep course, it's going to be, you know, that length of a sheep or 2 sheep too far over one way or the other, and it's going to be point worthy. I think the other important thing that is probably going to be similar in the 2 trials is the flow of the sheep. You want to keep that flow moving forward. You know, probably that's significant different. It is different, and it is similar at an obstacle. You know, for instance, trying to get the sheep flowing into the drenching race, for instance, is if the sheep not up at that point, how is the handler and the dog going to undo that? And it's very similar to the 3 sheep trial, that the handler's pretty much going to take up a position and try and work their dog to undo that situation. Or if it's not going to happen, go in and give the dog a hand and maybe loosen that front sheep and get it pointing down, moving down the race. But, you know, of course, you're going to have to pay the price for that as well. So that dog that's going to be able to do that and maintain that flow going forward is the dog that's going to rise to the top at the end of the day. So, but probably the thing would be, like, for me personally, is just finding that position to be in where you're not affecting play while that competitor's working the course in front of you. And just depending how the course is set up as well, you know, just those little physical things. If you know, as the judge, you just got to climb the fence, but making sure you're doing that so that you're not taking any effect on the sheep, or even distracting that young dog if it's an encourage or a novice run sort of thing.
So, as president of New South Wales Sheepdog Workers, obviously you have a bit of a future and something you'd like to see not change, but how would you like to see the sport grow?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's pretty important to me because I just love doing this sort of stuff with the dogs, and I'd like to shore up a future for the sports side of it, definitely. So probably one of those priority things, or one of the things that's probably important, is maintaining membership and growing the membership. So, like, for me, my thinking is the power's in the people. If we have more members, we clearly have more interest in sheepdogs and sheepdog trialing because we've got more people that are wanting to do it, and trying to shore up a secure future in regards to events that keep happening. If there's more people in the sport, there's probably more likelihood of some people wanting to take on running the trial in the future. And so we can, if there are people that want to do that, there's plenty of people that have got experience running trials, of course, that we can help steer them in the right direction to do that. And that's the great thing with the members that we've got as well. There's so many members that are willing to give up time and drive a number of hours to go and help someone else start up that new trial or run that trial for the weekend. That's the really great thing that I see happening all the time. So that's where I would like to see it go, is that our membership grows. So that we can keep the sport going, but more broadly as well, I think we've got a bit of a responsibility that, being that sort of thing, just like yard trials as well, it's a bit more in the public eye, and we are sort of that shiny face of representing what working stock dogs can do and how they work, how we treat our livestock, and it's not just in the competition arena either. It's also in the let-out yards that people are walking past as well. If they see that the stock are being handled well, we're working our dogs well. Like, whether it's at a yard trial or a 3 sheep trial, we're not chasing sheep, banging them off fences. We're not running the dogs into the ground. You've both been to dog trials, and there's a judge's talk at the start of the trial. The judge's talk isn't there to quickly take you through the rules. It's pretty much an introduction to the judge and any questions that you might have. But one of the things I often remind the people about is that we have to look after the sheep because they're not ours. We've got a responsibility to those animals anyway, and the owner of those sheep. Plus, we're in the public eye. But the other bit of the equation that we have to look after is the dog. And so that's one of the responsibilities you take on as a judge as well. If you think that the sheep or the dog have had enough, that it might be time to call it for that run for that day. And it doesn't mean that that's a bad dog or a bad handler. It's just that the things aren't necessarily going their way that day, and right. So it might be better just to call it quits and go and get a drink of water and cool down before it goes.
Only water?
Well, it depends on time of day, I suppose.
Mate, do you have a favourite trial?
Well, if I didn't say it wasn't the sheep trial, I certainly have a sweet spot for our own trial, and one of the reasons for that is because we run 2 rings, and I like that for a few reasons. But one of the reasons is as well that we have the novice ring running, so it's also that good training ground for our newer judges coming through. But after that, Molong would have to be one of the favourites. The location's great. It also, just from that sort of other side of things, gets a lot of people just popping in because it's on the main road. People are driving by and they go, "Oh, there's a sheepdog trial. What's going on here?" They don't know what it is, and they pop in, and it's funny how many conversations you have with people. You might be walking around with one of your dogs and they say, "Oh, so do you compete in this and whatever?" And then conversation starts, you give them a rundown, you might sort of almost commentate a run for them that's happening on the big arena. And in recent years, Molong had a picket fence put up around the outside of the ground. It's got all the poplar trees around the outside. It's just a picture. It's straight off that sort of postcard sort of.
Little creek and everything. And
That's right. But yeah, after that, Willow Tree would be the close second to Molong as well. We just always have a great time up there. But, yeah, Willow Tree wasn't on the last couple of years, but they're probably my top three, I suppose. And then yard trials, I really enjoyed the Mudgee Small Farm Field Days trial. The sheep were good because they were testing, and you got a pretty cheap entry into the field days as well. So you got to have a look around at the holy shit sort of thing at the same time. Yeah.
Can I just make a comment? Your 3 sheep trial at Geary was actually my first ever 3 sheep trial. And I have to say, it was wonderful. It was very welcoming for someone that, knew a few people in the sport, but not too many. So for anyone that's wanting to go, I really highly recommend it. That Mum and I will be back there this year, without a doubt. It was just a great trial, great stock, everything about it. So I'd like to say thank you to you and Jackie for running it.
No, thanks very much. And we've got to take our hats off to, particularly last year as well. Like our club did a great job. That was our first trial back after 4 years off with drought and COVID as well. So I'm really pleased how it went. And the other thing I want to mention as well is a number of the people from the Sydney Sheepdog Club helped the trial as far as coming up and setting up beforehand, a few days before, and timekeeping and taking on some roles during the weekend. Danny Kerr and I are up early each morning moving the sheep around on the open ground to be ready for the start of play and stuff like that. So again, it just shows you that community within the trialing circuit sort of thing. So that last year was really a sort of warming feeling getting the trial back again as well. So but it's probably, you also mentioned the sheep law. One of the things I think is important running your trial is preparing your stock. And it's not so much about making sure everyone runs 100, but just making sure that the sheep have been introduced to a dog and they're workable. So all your competitors get a fair run and they get a chance to get a start and have a run, but also again, we're always in the public eye. Having stock that aren't stressed or overly stressed whilst being worked around the ground by a dog is pretty important as well. And it's very important for the owner of the sheep to see that as well. So, Thanks for the kind words about the trial.
And mate, just quickly, while you are a president at the moment, mate, judging, people that thought about judging and have hesitated, what advice would you give those people? And how do they become a judge?
Yeah, well, great question. We've got a judges panel now, and so there's 6 of us on that. And I'd say if people are interested in judging, contact one of the judges on the judges panel, and we can have a talk about it. And that's not to say you don't talk to anyone else that's not a judge. Like if you're friends with someone that is a current judge, ask them about it. What you need to know. What are your, I suppose, requirements of judging? And so one of the things is that you're going to be on from start to finish each of the days of the trial. So like I guess one of the things is you have to understand you need that little bit of endurance there. But if you're still keen on judging, is like I said, talk to some judges about the actual role itself, but then maybe put your hand up for a smaller trial to start with, so you can sort of get your feet wet that way, rather than jumping in and volunteering yourself for a big trial that might be going for a few days and they've got heaps of entries, so it's a 6:30 start and they're going till dusk kind of thing. That might be a bit hard straight off the bat. And the process to become a judge with us is it's not that difficult, but you'll get nominated, and so it runs through the council to get accepted as a nomination. So recently, we just at the Bungendore trial, we had some training during that trial for prospective judges, which is really great. So we had Will Goggin took everyone through a dry run at lunchtime on the Friday, and then Friday night we had a bit of I suppose a seminar, I guess you'd say, in one of the rooms, and then the next day I ran a young dog, and so the new judges had plenty of potential to work the clickers or take points. Go in pear shape pretty quick, but interestingly, they're some of the harder runs to judge because points are coming off so fast, and you just sort of go, "Oh, have I taken enough for that sort of slightly untidy a run?" But one of the other things, sort of starting off, if you think you've got interest in judging, is grab a judge, or someone who is a judge, and just say, "Oh, can we sit behind the casting peg and judge 2 or 3 runs on the cast, lift, and draw?"
Can you walk around with a judge in
I
a
was just
three
about to
sheet?
say
Yeah,
that.
you can. It's just
Maybe not a high profile open, but like a novice.
yeah. And I did that with Pete Oxley, for instance. Jumped in. He had a golf cart at the trial we were at, and I jumped in with him. So I didn't run a dog that weekend at all. So if you're going to do that, if you're at a trial and you're running dogs, you need to make sure you finish running your dogs, so you're not sort of knowingly or unknowingly getting some tips off the judge. Think, "Oh, right, I'll make sure I won't do that when I run my next dog." It's not really fair. But yeah, certainly do that. But one of the things I'd probably say is if you're going to do that whilst you're with the judge, try not to have a conversation with them while they're judging. Save that for in between the runs if it's a quick question, or when you come to a lunch break or a smoko break or something. Just go, "Oh, there's that run, of such and such. I noted it down on my notepad. This particular thing happened. How would you manage that judging wise?" But probably the other bit of advice I'd say with that is as well, once you start judging, and I did it a fair bit, I noticed that, I don't know, for a good number of trials that I judged in the early stage, there was something that came up that was completely different every time, and the rule book did not accommodate for that. You had to make a decision sort of in the moment, and have a reason for making that decision. But then I'd ring a few of the more experienced judges later that next week and just go, "Oh, I was at the trial, or you might have been there. I don't know if you saw the run, but this particular thing happened, and this is the decision I came up with. What's your opinion on that?" And that was a great sort of learning experience as well. Just from, I guess, the point of view of kind of reinforcing that decision that you made was a good decision at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So some great advice there.
Sort of coming to the end of it all, but what advice would you give to someone, wanting to come into the 3-sheep sort of community and world?
Well, I guess if you're looking for a dog, is probably the first thing would be is, just if you don't know anyone with working dogs, just you get in touch with the secretary to maybe get some contacts with people that might have dogs that are available to purchase, whether it's a pup or a going dog. But I'd get to a couple of trials and have a look, and you can start to meet people that way, whether you meet someone that might have a dog that's available at the time. But then moving forward, once you start training that dog as well, is once you start to get prepared for a trial is the biggest challenge, and I think the biggest fear people have starting off is that, you know, they might go to a friend's place and train the dog, or they've got to set up at home where they can train the dog. Then they walk out on the trial ground and it suddenly looks very big. that you got a cast on your dog and a stop on your dog and a call off on your dog. And so that comes back to that sort of foundation training as well, that those earlier things being that you can call your dog off the stock and you can stop your dog. If it's starting to chase the sheep, you can stop it and just call an end to that and call the dog back to you and maybe clip it on a lead and whatever you need to do. But yeah, sort of reach out to the association to that very first starting point and see where the next trial's at. And people are always welcome to come along. There's always someone there that's happy to talk about dogs and what's happening on the trial ground and that sort of stuff for sure. So that'd probably be the starting point, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Great advice, mate. Mate, was there a question that stood out to you tonight and they will win a bag of Enduro high energy food for working dogs with real kangaroo meat?
Yeah, I think it was Jai probably earlier on.
You had a couple of tracking questions there.
Yeah.
Really thought about them. I'm looking at them now, like the detail. They're like 4 or 5 lines. I can't see what they say from here. Like, my eyes are terrible, but he actually put some real thought in that. So, Jai, if you want to drop us a line, mate, send us some info. That would be great. The bag of Enduro coming your way. And John, for being a guest tonight, we've got a bag of feed coming your way as well, mate. So we'll get that off to you shortly. But we're not going to let you go that easy.
One last question as always.
Excellent.
Would you rather fight one duck the size of a horse or 20 horses the size of ducks?
Well,
and why?
I'll put some thought into this. I'll take the duck the size of a horse.
We don't get that one today. We get the small ones all the time.
And the reason for that is duck is actually a pretty popular dish on the home, so we're going to get
what you could sell it for.
That's right. So I think
I love a good bit of Peking duck.
we've got a pretty big freezer in the shed as well. So
was that a big one in the shed?
We've got a big freezer in the shed. So
yeah, there you go.
I'll take
Love it.
Sorted. Mate, thank you very much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. Know you got a lot going on within the three sheep community, your work, your young pups. Really appreciate you giving us your time.
No, I think you enjoyed it.
No, thank you. And to everyone that tuned in tonight and even everyone with their questions, thank you. And everyone listening back, hope you enjoy it. And please remember, we learn every day. The day we stop learning will be a sad one for all of us.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, mate.